Just on the edge of my seat to hear how it went, dude.
Well, we're on camera, Cody. I'm not gonna tell you all my crazy stories right now.
No. I get that.
Save those for later, guys.
Yeah, see, Jared's gonna tell on me.
Yeah.
How's it going this evening, guys?
Super good. How are you?
Doing good. Good to see you again, Steve.
Good to see you as well.
Yeah. This should be my last remote meeting. Just got my mom into a home this evening, so
Oh, excellent.
it was time. But yeah. So
Mhm.
you'll be seeing me a lot more.
Perfect. Did you get her into a spot here in the Dalles?
Yeah. It was kind of a messed up situation because I had a place and then at the last minute, like everyone was like, she had a fall literally on the move-in day.
Oh,
And like everything got scrambled and it was a mess, but we found a group home here that has some really good ladies just locally because the other place we were looking at was in Hood River and I was like, I wanted to be able to just pop in and visit her, So
yep. Nice.
yeah. So all good things in the end.
Very nice. Still need another few? Okay, I'm gonna go. Oh wait. Oh, good. Okay. Okay. All right. Planning Commission meeting, June 4th, 2026, just a little after 5:30. I call this meeting to order. May we please have the roll call?
Melissa Alvarado,
Here.
Cody Cornett,
Here.
Jared Gosson,
Here.
John Grant,
Here.
Steve Light,
Here.
Rhea Pena, and Carrie Pippenich are absent.
Excellent. The Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible.
with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Next is the approval of the agenda. If everyone has read through the agenda, may I please have a motion to approve with a second?
A motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I second.
All right, a motion has been made and seconded to approve the agenda. All in favor of approving the agenda, raise your right hand, say aye.
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 Hi.
Thank you, unanimous. Next is the approval of the minutes from December 18th, 2025 and February 5, 2026. May I please have a motion to approve those minutes from commissioners that were here? Yes. Oh, I need to do them separate. Okay, so first let's do the motion for the December 18th, 2025 minutes, please.
I make a motion to approve December 18, 2025 minutes.
I'll second that.
A motion has been made to approve the December 18 minutes. May I please, and seconded, may I please have excuse me. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. Sorry, I was having a moment there. I was present. Us three were present.
It's not.
John was not.
Stain,
I was not as well.
But we can, as long as we have watched and looked over everything.
Gosson's,
Yes.
sorry.
Okay, same thing for the February 5th minutes, please.
I make a motion to approve February 5th minutes.
Second.
Excellent. A motion has been made and seconded. All in favor of approving the minutes from the February 5 meeting, raise your right hand, say aye.
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 Unanimous again. Next is the time for public comment. During this portion of the meeting, anyone may speak on any subject that does not later appear on the agenda. 5 minutes per person will be allowed. Do we have any public comment, public on the Zoom call? I don't think so. All right, well, moving on from that. Next is the legislative public hearing, adoption of resolution PC 633-26, recommending city council approval of zoning ordinance amendment number 112-26, clarifying and conforming procedures related to the adopted hearings officer process and making associated technical amendments.
I actually think we may need a script. I totally forgot about that.
I was just thinking about that.
Hey, Jonathan.
Yeah, stand by. Tell you what, is there a world where we can do the discussion item first and come back to the legislative hearing, and in that time I'll have sent over a script.
Yeah, that works for me.
Sure.
Let's do it. Thank you for your patience, everybody.
Okay, an adjustment. We'll move on to discussion item, housing code modernization and middle housing policy discussion.
Great, thank you. And I actually think that this is probably going to be, the majority of our discussion. I, don't want to gloss over that zoning ordinance amendment, but it is very much a house cleaning amendment. So I was probably going to be breezing through that pretty quick. So it does give us additional time here. I'd like to share my screen. Give me 1 second while I pull that up. All right. So first things first, I would just like to introduce our new logo. The city's just rebranded. You'll start seeing a rollout of this logo. City staff have been working on this probably for the past, like 6 months or so. Really trying to stick to, I think throughout it, we all, still think that we have a pretty great city logo seal now. So we wanted to kind of stay true to that in some way, but also there is just some overall branding and streamlining of material that we're going to be moving forward with. So you'll start seeing this packet doesn't include it, but we've rebranded all of our staff reports, memos, everything that goes out, minutes, and everything the like. So this is the first presentation for it. I think it looks really great. And I want to just give a shout out to the city clerk, Amy L., for all her hard work on it. So the discussion this evening is middle housing policy discussion. So tonight I'm going to introduce some findings from a city's a recent housing code evaluation that we conducted. We're going to discuss the implementation of housing production strategy action 2.1. We're going to just get some additional feedback. We have some discussion questions. You'll see those in your staff report. We'll kind of go through them one by one. These are discussions, so it's a little more open-ended here. I don't mind if you have questions and you interrupt me throughout a discussion. If you have a question on the top of your head, I'm happy to do that with discussions. There's no problem at all with me. And this is going to inform the preparation of some future draft amendments that we'd be bringing in front of you. The goal for that is sometime this summer to bring those forward. And there are no code amendments that are being considered tonight. So this is pretty open-ended. We have some ideas as staff of how to move these things forward.
Sorry.
Staff has some ideas to move these forward, but we just wanted to get your, eyes on them to see if we are, missing the point or going about it the way that we should with these amendments. So middle housing. So this is a build on the housing production strategy that was adopted this last year. As we all know, the housing production strategy has 19 different actions that the city is going to be pursuing over the next 8 years. One of those high priority projects or items is expanding middle housing opportunities in the low density zone. This was viewed as a high impact item due to the fact of the 200 acres, approximately 200 acres of land, buildable land in the low density residential zone. If you look at all of our zones, the low density has the most undeveloped land. A lot of it is on the east side of town. So in working through this, staff, when we looked at the middle housing for the low density, we also expanded a little bit further just to take a look at like middle housing, how middle housing is working in our code. We don't really define middle housing right now. We have middle housing. There is an option to, build a triplex, but it's not as clear as it should be, is what we feel. So staff worked with KC Planning Services as well as MIG to put together a code review. They reviewed our code, provided us with some suggestions, and they also did some best practice analysis of some other communities and how other communities are handling middle housing. Middle housing, as you all may know, this is something that became a bit more significant with HB 2001. That was back in 2019, and I'll get into that more. The city has already basically complied with HB 2001 because that is the most significant aspect is when we started allowing duplexes on every lot. That was required of the city with HB 2001. And so we complied with that. We did some additional amendments. So 2019, we did some amendments. 2021, we did some. So now we're back at it, looking at how we can expand further and get into the weeds a little more. So just a brief for everybody, what is middle housing? You will probably, if you look up middle housing anywhere, you're probably going to see some type of spectrum like this. And middle housing is really, it's best portrayed in this picture. It is the housing that is that is in the middle of single family detached housing up to your multi-units, everything in between. So you're talking duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, townhouses, cottage clusters. These are the most common. These are the ones that we'll be discussing throughout this process. So this staff report was broken up into really, 5 different categories: review and approval procedures, development standards, parking requirements, code modernization and design standards, and then adaptive reuse and future housing topics. That one is really something to bring to your attention. We probably won't touch on it as much with these code amendments, but it is something that we also looked at. So that is effectively conversions of single family homes into duplexes, single family homes into triplexes. What's the process for those types of conversions? So our current building process is one that I personally think has resulted in less middle housing being built over the years. Our current building permit process is single family detached or a duplex or a 1 ADU. This is all processed through a building permit process. Typically processed in less than a month. Clear and objective standards, straightforward relatively. You start with the city and then you go to Wasco County Building Codes, and they're the ones that review structural, mechanical, plumbing, and the like. Once you pass 2 units, our code effectively pushes you into a site plan review process. So anything more, so you're talking those triplexes, quadplexes, even the second ADU. So if you have a single family home, 1 ADU, you want to do an ADU in the basement, that's going to trigger a site plan review. The site plan review is a land use application. I think this board is familiar with that. After the site plan review process, then you go through the building permit process. So just that right there is added time, added resources, added costs to developing middle housing. So this discussion and this point here is to talk about ways that we can maybe reduce that review. So option 1 is, I think, just out of the gate, processing middle housing as ministerial applications. So building permits. Someone comes in the door, they want to build a quadplex. It's a building permit. It's not a land use application. That's one option. Some communities are doing that. It really just depends. Larger cities, HB 2001 broke up cities by population, and any community that's over 50,000 is actually 50 or 25,000. I'm blanking on it right now, is actually required to just process a quadplex through a building permit. So it's happening in bigger cities. Here we are required to do the duplex route. The other option to consider is different standards by zoning districts. Should middle housing and low density be a building permit, or should it be site plan review or just a building permit? In high density, medium density, is that just a building permit? But like I said, currently, if you're building middle housing in the Dalles, you're going through a site plan review process. Another way to look at it is a unit count threshold. X amount, currently that X is 3. We could look at it, for instance, the definition of multifamily is 5 units or more. So you could say that maybe that's a threshold that you'd be comfortable with. After 5, that requires a site plan review. The other is just based on a housing type. So you would look at, maybe quadplexes. You want quadplexes to be site plan reviews. Maybe you want townhouses or cottage clusters to be site plan reviews. That's what we're going to kind of discuss here, and just wanted to kind of get everybody considering what they think is best for the Dalles in moving development of housing forward.
Quick
Yeah.
question. Will you just tell us briefly the difference between, on your end, the difference between someone just going through a building permit and a site plan review? Like,
Yeah. So a site plan review process is, I will not mince words, it is longer. Oregon State Land Use Code is a slow one. We'll just say that. There's these baked in timelines. An individual submits information to us. Staff has 30 days to deem an application complete, meaning we just need to make sure, did you submit a site plan? Did you submit your building elevations? We do our best to not go to the 30 days because we want to move it along, but state does allow us 30 days. And the 30 days sometimes is needed. If you get 10 applications in all at the same time, you are going to need to use that 30 days. Meanwhile, in that 30 days, we effectively could approve a building permit. So after the 30-day completeness, you deem the application complete, you notify the neighborhood, 14-day comment period to the neighbors, and then you draft a staff report. But we typically look at it as about, from the day it's deemed complete, 45 days for that staff report to be deemed, for us to approve a staff report or deny a staff report, make our decision. And then there's a 10-day appeal period tacked onto that. So then anybody that has a right to appeal it can then appeal that decision. So we do wait that full 10 days just in the event that something is to occur. So you are talking about additional time baked in. After all that's said and done, there's probably conditions of approval that come out of that site plan review. Then the individual is packaging all that stuff up again, giving it back to us to review it through the building permit process. So as you can imagine, just from what I'm explaining there are a lot of steps. There's a lot of time that goes into it compared to with a building permit. Our team has really been pushing this last year to try to deem building permits and land use applications aren't treated the same way in land use law either. They don't have the same statutes. It's not a 30-day completeness. There's, if it takes more time for us to get that information or whatever the case is, we're not held to that exact 30 days. But we do our best. We try within 7 days to review the information of a building permit packet, let the applicant know what's missing. And then once that information is received, we start processing, we start working with the fire department, making sure everything checks out, our engineering department, our utilities. So hopefully that's kind of a nutshell for you. But I think our application fees are relatively low here at the city, but there is an additional cost to do both of them tacked onto each other. I think, personally, I think it's kind of frustrating for me to process them because I'm looking at it once and then I'm looking at it again. But when you look at it again, you're just looking at it a little more technical. You're not getting into your calculations of your utilities when you're doing the site plan review. Site plan review is effectively, it's a concept plan that is almost finished. It is almost a building permit packet, but you're going to add a couple more details when you do the building permit packet. So long explanation, but it's a longer process. So a couple questions here. Just wanted to throw those out, kind of touching on those topics. Should review procedures, just kind of open up, should review procedures be different in the low density compared to the medium density and high density zones? I just kind of wanted to, maybe I'll throw these out there. I'll do the discussion points. Oh, Jared, questions?
Yeah, well, I did want to kind of had a discussion and a point on what I think would be kind of an easy way to approach it that's scalable, but I'm not sure if we want to have that discussion yet or wait until later in your presentation.
Well, if it has to do with the review procedure, we can do it now. I mean, I
Okay.
think this is probably the most, since this presentation, the staff report's kind of broken up into like 5 different chunks, this would probably be the time for us to chat about it.
Okay, yeah, because I think like a realistic way to approach this would be to kind of do a scalable approach between like options 2 and 4, where as we go up in density, the process of application becomes easier essentially. You have, for instance, maybe we want to allow triplexes in low density, but then a quadplex in medium without a permit, and then, scaling up and making it easier in the high density areas to build the high density housing, which seems to make sense of what we're going for, because we're looking for more houses, but at the same time, we don't want to not allow the neighbors to kind of speak their piece about a bigger unit going into their small neighborhood. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's my thoughts on the process. I don't know if anyone else had thoughts in addition to that.
Some initial comments I have on, and I think this is good for the conversation of the group. We are specifically talking about, and I think it's not going too far away from your comment here. We are specifically talking about the middle housing. So when we talk about multifamily, if we're going to be changing up multifamily procedures, we'll definitely be doing that in another conversation at another time. But yeah, to your point, yeah, it can totally be, scaled. Whatever. I mean, you'll see we've snapped a couple photos around town a couple years ago. When you look at it, there's middle housing units all over town. It's just whether or not they were classified middle housing, this buzzword that came out just in the last few years, that's one thing. But we have a lot of older big homes that have just been converted over the years. So sometimes you'll be driving through a neighborhood and you don't even know you just passed a quadplex, and it's tucked in between all these single family homes. So kind of got a little off from your comment there, but notes taken here.
Yeah, and really the intent is to speed up the process while still allowing people to comment if there's something bigger coming into their neighborhood. And if they make it to where it's tucked in and neighbors aren't going to care, like that's great. But I'm trying to bring attention to those types of situations to still give people that time to review the process versus just approving through a building permit. Because that's probably the biggest process change, right? Is when you have to do a site plan, there has to be notice to the neighbors that this is going to happen so they have time to object. That's the big difference between just a permit and the site plan, right?
Correct. Yes, a building permit does not require a neighborhood notification. And one thing to keep in mind here is the action of our housing production strategy is not only are we looking at the review process, but we're also looking at the fact that we are going to be adding middle housing into the low density zone. And I think it comes down to what the board is comfortable with, what the city's comfortable with. Once a triplex and a quadplex is allowed in the low density zone, how do you want that to be processed?
Yeah.
So some other questions here. Oh, go for it.
Oh, I was just gonna say, my comment is if we're looking for opening things up for more buildings, maybe even a triplex without a site plan. But that's, if we're already allowing duplexes, do we need to allow triplexes as well? That's really the question, I think, as far as my opinion on the scaling, from my opinion, so.
Being allowed in the sense that
With a building permit versus a site plan. That's what
okay.
I'm commenting on.
Okay.
Sorry, losing some context there. But those are my thoughts.
Yeah.
Continue.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll go through a couple of these other questions, just to kind of get everybody's, thinking about this. I think Commissioner Gossin touched on this. Should triplexes and quadplexes be ministerial? Maybe based on the zone. Should review be based on the housing type, the district that it's in, the number of units? At what point should that site plan review occur? Should townhouses and cottage clusters be reviewed differently? And to put some numbers into perspective for you. The city of the Dalles we've reviewed we've approved a few multifamily developments over the past few years. One of the biggest ones is downtown, the Basalt Commons project. But as far as units being built, the first multifamily unit is currently being built on the west side of town since 2019. So, and when we talk multifamily in this context, we're talking anything more than 2 units. So that just shows that we have really been missing out on middle housing for many, many years. And I think there is in the development community. I think that additional step, that site plan step, the additional time, the additional money, and the resources going into it, we have seen people pull back. We have seen triplexes proposed, requirements placed on them. They pull back and they build a duplex. So that does happen. That is something that we see and is not uncommon, but it's not every day, but it does happen.
So about how many do we have as far as people submitting applications and then pulling back? Do you think over the last?
There's a handful. I won't say it's like I say, I wouldn't say it's like an everyday thing, but I think it's enough for me to remember in my head, because it's one of those things that, yes, our job is to enforce these rules, but at the end of the day, we still want people to try to build what they want to build. We just have to keep them in their lane, right? And so I can't keep like a number for sure, but there's 2 off the top of my head that I know of.
And the one that's being built right now, is that off Myrtle or?
It is.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's the triplex.
That's a sixplex. So that's even outside of this conversation. So that would still be processed through the site plan review. Aside from this conversation, they'd still go through the site plan review and then a building permit. So that's because it's like 5 or more. That's going to be the cutoff that we'll get on here in a little bit. 5+ is going to be your multifamily, and the multifamily is not going to be part of our conversation when we do all this work. But yes, that is the first one moving since 2019.
So quick question, when you said if that's the first multifamily application and build since 2019, so single family house plus ADU, you are not calling multifamily?
No.
Okay.
No, and we've rounded around about that. Even a single family with 2 ADUs, granted it's 3 units on the property.
Mhm.
With a straight face, you can't call 2 ADUs and a single family multifamily. There's no way, It's still, our code still considers it almost this multifamily. It takes them through a process. We processed one just this last year. We began to process it like a multifamily, require certain, multifamily requirements. And then it was a little bit of like pulling back, like this doesn't make sense. This doesn't fit. These are, the ADUs in the basement. There's a garage in the back, and it's not a multifamily development, right? So that's why when we talk about middle housing is where, like I was saying earlier, they can just be tucked in throughout the neighborhood. Not like a multifamily development. It's a bigger footprint. It's something you're really going to notice and see. It's going to jump out to you probably a bit more than middle housing is.
Okay. If I may, just to go down the list, I don't think that review procedures should be different between low density through the zone. The first question, I'm having a tough time today. I think just be all the same review process. No site team meeting for any middle housing. I think it should just be building permit for single family, duplex, triplex, quadplex. You're doing everything in the building permit process anyway. And if it's allowed in the code, there's no reason, and Jared, this kind of contradicts your point, and this is just my opinion. There's no reason to have public input on something that's allowed. Like it's either gonna be following the rules, which you are looking at, or it's not.
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't think that the opportunity for public comment or having that be appealed is fair to the person doing the application. And if it's allowed, it's allowed. I mean, we've had plenty of experiences here where, we've spent a lot of time having meetings and listening to people's appeals for things that are just like completely and totally outright allowed. and it's a lot of just wasted time, frankly.
I'm definitely in agreement. I mean, if somebody buys a property and wants to develop it, and they're going through and all the red tape and doing everything that's required of them, they should be able to make it a little bit easier than going through the site plan review.
Yeah, and
my
going along with that, if it's a site plan review, when you're getting to 5 or more, I think that's a good threshold for like, that's a lot more traffic on that street, or, that really turns into a different kind of parking issue, or whatever it may be. So I think that's a good line to draw that site
Mhm.
plan review at, but anything less than that, we should just let those things go through a building permit process.
Okay, yep. And I think a couple points to that before we get to Commissioner Gossin here. I think a couple points to go with that is we have to process housing applications with clear and objective standards.
Right.
And when you're going through a site plan review process, that's a process. It almost, in my opinion, it's not really needed if you're processing things through clear and objective standards. Like, this is your height, you meet the height. This is your setback, you meet the setback. Whatever the case is. So, and that's how we have to treat. We can't apply unclear and subjective criteria when we're approving housing. And then there's also something to throw out there. There's a new House bill that is coming through, HB 4037. I could be blanking on that. Jonathan could probably correct me. This is a new House bill that is actually taking effect July 1st. And the state has come out, continue to push this, where applications for needed housing may no longer be appealed by anyone other than the applicant.
Ooh, what's needed housing? What's that mean?
All housing.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So it's effectively applications that we've seen in the past, subdivisions that we've seen in the past that have drug on for a long time.
Mhm.
Those would not be able to be appealed unless the applicant is the one appealing it. So that is new legislation, goes into effect July 1st. We'll be working on some code amendments on that. So to that point, I think it kind of goes that neighborhood input. We always like to hear from, we love community engagement. We always like to hear from people, but if there's no real process for them to appeal an application, then it makes you kind of question, why are we going through the process?
Yeah, and also why give them the false hope of an opportunity? Like, they could say all they want, it's not going to change anything. Why give them the opportunity to waste their time? Yeah.
Commissioner Dawson?
Yeah. So yeah, with that knowledge that there's like that process will be essentially null and void and just kind of a waste of everyone's time. Maybe we could look at instead of a notice for or appeal, just a notice, some sort of notice that this sort of unit is being put up. Like, not a notice of appeal, but at least letting people know in the neighborhood that this is coming up. Because one of my concerns in allowing that just all middle housing is, my understanding is the difference between like the triplexes and as you go up in units, I'm sure the allowing height probably changes as you go up in size.
Mhm.
So like where you have an area where you just have single family homes and you can only build so high, well, then you have this big unit that comes in and, blocks your view completely. The fact that you can't appeal is one thing, but maybe at least we could curb the process of having these larger units coming into these small neighborhoods. Maybe that's something we should consider, because otherwise we're just going to be having these large units pop up around us, sometimes in places we might not want them. As far as around density, and you mentioned the parking matter on top of that, but I think a visual space and the views of the gorge is something to consider. And, someone might buy a house and then just to have someone block the very reason they bought that house a year later, it might leave a sour taste in people's mouths. So.
Okay.
So some other comments, some other things here that I, do want to touch on. And to get this out there is we're talking middle housing, those triplex and quads, as you mentioned, Chair Cornett. I think there is a distinction to be made with townhouses and cottage clusters, though, to the point of a cottage cluster is effectively a small group of homes built on one lot. You're effectively building a multifamily development. Those cottage clusters, you could have 8, you could have 12. So then it's kind of that consideration. My thought has been that is likely something that would require a site plan review. However, just wanted to kind of plant the seed in that discussion with all of you because it's a little more than just a quadplex, everything contained in one building potentially.
Yeah, I agree with that. That a cottage cluster should be a site plan review because with the different buildings and elevation and drainage and stormwater and everything else, it just turns into a lot more. And of course, again, the code will pick that up, but I think a site plan review would be a little more. Yeah, that's what I think.
Do you think anything to do with the number of townhouses would impact your thoughts on where to go? Because when we're talking about, when we say like 5 units or more, we're talking about 5 units or more on one piece of land. But a townhouse, of course, you're stacking a unit and everybody's 0 lot line, everybody's butted up against each other. So any thoughts on how those may be processed? Are they going to be, that's effectively 1 unit of land. That's 1 unit on a piece of land, but they just happen to be connected. So it's a larger combined footprint. So I just kind of wanted to get that thought out there for the group too. And any thoughts you had on that? Commissioner Gosson?
Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I would say anything above 4, because that's going into that cottage cluster where you're having these larger, more complex needs for utilities and parking and everything at that point. I don't know if anyone else thinks that that's too low of a number, but that makes sense to me anyways.
That makes sense to me as well.
Or makes sense to me as well.
Would
And-
you would that be for cottage clusters and townhouses, you think?
Are we able
I-
to differentiate between the two? Like set a number of units for one and set a number of units
Oh,
for the other?
Yeah, I think this is the time to get all that figured out, definitely.
I think it's hard because you would have to also take into account like the land size and make sure that the infrastructure's there for it.
Hmm.
If you're doing 5 units on an acre or if you're doing 15 units on an acre, you just,
Right.
it just, yeah, you'd have to be there's a lot more information that you would need in order to set a number, I think,
For the townhouses?
for both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
In my
Units in
opinion.
general.
Any thoughts on what, because we do have density requirements.
Mhm.
So just trying to think of what a number could be, I guess, if you're meeting your density. I guess it would be something for us to look into further
It's just
on.
hard. There's so many different types of land and sizes and everything out there too. So it's hard because it kind of is a case by case, but I know that you have to set something in place to follow.
Right.
So quick question. So we can do, or a person can do a single family home with 2 ADUs, right? Just via a building permit.
That's the thing right now is that the second ADU requires a site plan review.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I feel like that, yeah, because if it's more than 2, it kind of starts to turn into a cottage cluster, even if the single family home's huge. So I feel like for a cottage cluster, it should also be cut off at 4 for sure, but
Maybe 5.
maybe 5. I was gonna say
Yeah.
maybe 3,
Huh.
just because that's.
You're saying 3 ADUs and the single family home?
No, I'm just saying if it's like a cottage cluster, if there's 3 or more cottages, that should be a
Gotcha.
site team.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because right now it's a single family home with 2 ADUs, which is the same thing, just different size buildings and basically just different nomenclature also requires a site team.
And that would be part of this discussion too, is, ADUs are not included in middle housing. When you look at like definitions of ADUs, they're accessory dwelling units.
Mhm.
They are extras, right? Even in our density code, when you're talking about density, if you want to talk about maximum density, I think it's the maximum density element. We don't even count ADUs. ADUs are counted as 0 units if you want to maximize your density. So if your density on your site is you have 10 units allowed on the site, well, you could build 5 ADUs and we're still going to look at it as there's only 10 on the site because those ADUs are extra. And that's the ability to continue to encourage ADUs because they are just really pretty small little pieces. So that's also the conversation here of if the board is interested in the second ADU, should that really require a site plan review or should it just be a building permit?
I mean, I would definitely like to see that as just a permit.
Mhm.
I think, because we take a look at the city and, the workforce, and a lot of people are going into using ADUs or, renting out rooms, those types of things. And it just gives more ability to people to, you know, get more housing,
Mhm.
cheaper housing, just because the market isn't flooded. We have tons of people that work right downtown, and the service industry is definitely one of them. And that's would be a great opportunity for the Dalles to bring in more,
Affordable housing.
affordable housing for the workforce that, I think that a lot of the businesses around here need more.
Yeah,
more
service industry in
yeah.
particular. Yeah. And right now, a quadplex or a sixplex has to go through site review.
Yeah, right now a triplex
Okay.
does too.
A triplex does it too.
Yeah. So I'm kind of hearing maybe you're looking at that 5 is the threshold.
That's kind of what I
5
was
is the
thinking.
number of units. If you're building more than 5 units, it's going through a site
Yeah,
plan
whether
review
it's a
process.
cottage cluster or a townhome or a multifamily, and all goes through multifamily.
And that just makes it easier for people to remember too. Or, I'm kind of being selfish because I got to remember these things when I'm talking to people, and so does everyone else, I guess. But, if it's like 4 is the number, whether it be a plex or a cottage cluster or a townhome, like anything after that, it's a little bit more of a rigorous permit process.
Yeah.
So I think we're talking about 2 different things because I've heard over 5 and 5 and over, but I think we're looking at 5 and over. So if you have 5 units or more, that kind of where we're all sitting.
Yes.
I think so, and on the side, and we'll get into the terminology thing, and that actually aligns with definition of multifamily per state code. Is it's anything more than 5 is your multifamily. So it's really it's cleaner. 5 is the unit that when you're paying your parks SDCs. 5 is the threshold when you start to get a break as well. Okay, well, this was very, very helpful, very insightful. So I really appreciate this. I'll keep going unless anybody has other questions.
Let's keep rocking.
Another thing that we took a look at is development standards. Development standards, I'm sure you're all familiar. We look at area, width, depth, setbacks, height, open space, density, landscaping. All of these are factored into a building permit process and a site plan review process. So in doing some comparisons of, communities around the state, there's been less of an emphasis in some newer codes on lot width and lot depth. Then there's greater emphasis on the area, the setbacks, and the height. For the conversation here, the other thing that we wanted to highlight is we have our NC overlay, which is a neighborhood center overlay. These are effectively overlay. It's a second zone, if you want to look at it that way, that is laid on top of a residential zone. This is what allows for your little neighborhood markets to pop up. So we have a couple of neighborhood centers around town. And those, neighborhood centers are extremely important when you're talking about just like overall walkability for neighborhoods. In our NC overlay, this is something we're going to take a closer look at. Don't have all the information for you right now, for us to take a deeper dive, but it's actually The NC overlay has created more. Once you apply the NC overlay, it's actually more restrictive than the zone that's underneath. For instance, like lot sizes, if you have an NC overlay, it requires a larger minimum lot size than what's underneath it. So it's a little counterintuitive there. But for the other two aspects here, the idea, and just kind of wanted to get everybody's opinion on this lot width and depth. We've brought in front of the Planning Commission before an adjustment application. This was a few years ago now, where Habitat for Humanity actually wanted to develop on the corner of, it was like 13th and Kelly. It was a 50 by 100 lot. That's our typical lot in our downtown, right? So they wanted to divide it up into two 50 by 50s. One was going to face 13th, one was going to face Kelly. The one that faced Kelly, they had to go through an adjustment process to reduce the lot depth because the lot depth is 60 feet. So what seemed like a very practical, straightforward splitting of the lot, both of them facing other streets, perfect development scenario, really. They had to go through that additional step to the Planning Commission. Planning Commission did approve it, but it's just that additional step. So when you're looking at lot width and depth, there are weird shaped lots all over the place. Sometimes it makes it a bit more difficult for people to develop. For instance, we also went through a middle housing land division process, which is a state code process. It's not codified into our code yet, but there is I actually have a plat for you to sign after this meeting's over. So there's a 6-plex townhouse development over on 9th Street. They did not meet the lot width standard, so it couldn't go through the typical subdivision process. Then we had to take it through the middle housing division process. So there was a little more flexibility in that process. But that's all because the width, it wasn't wide enough. So this townhouse model had it was like, they were like 16 and a half feet wide, 17 feet wide, 6 units stacked next to each other. Minimum lot width is 20. So they couldn't go through a typical subdivision process. So they had to go through this extra process. So this idea of getting rid of lot widths and depths may sound a little maybe extreme for those of us who are like really used to the lot width and depth. We're still going to apply lot area. So if the lot area is 2,500 square feet, if that's your minimum, but you just so happen to only have, 19 feet on the front, you don't have to go through some extra step. So that is one thing that we wanted to consider with this, and just wanted to get like overall thoughts on that. I'll get into some other discussion points here. I just wanted to plant the seed with those development standards. So the questions here for this part of the conversation: what dimensional or overlay standards should be revisited? Overlays, we didn't touch on them too much here, but if anybody's familiar with the NC overlays, that would be, any questions that you may have with that. Which standards are the most important to retain of all of those that we mentioned? And then where can there be flexibility that can increase? Where can flexibility be increased while maintaining those predictable outcomes? So overall, I think the basis of the conversation is just like, what's the board's take on flexibility with development standards? Kind of a broad question. I'm happy to walk through the steps and answer any questions you have.
Well, I think that the lot width should be removed. And it should just be based on square footage, square area.
Lot width and depth.
Yeah, width and depth. Yeah. Because you're right, there are a lot of really odd shaped lots.
Yeah.
And, considerations in cul-de-sacs, for instance, for front
Right.
is something to consider. Yeah.
So you're looking at just doing a square space area. Like, is this space really big enough to have a development versus it needs to be this wide, essentially?
Right. The 2,500
That
square
makes
feet,
sense.
is that the minimum?
I think it's the minimum in our high density.
High density.
Yeah. What are you doing now? I think, when we're talking about attached single family or like townhouse units, I think you can get them down as low as 1,500.
Okay.
Yeah. But it kind of brings up that example about that townhouse development that when we can't get something to fit into the box, we have to go through all these processes, and finding that other communities are just dropping the lot width and depth. It seems like a great example, especially, your idea of a cul-de-sac lot. They're funky.
Yeah, and also as long as those setbacks are still there and appropriate, it's creating it's creating parameters for how small that's actually going to get.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to have, yeah.
The one thing to consider with setbacks, and just want to throw it out there, I didn't have it up here on the screen. Some recommendations from our consultant team was the idea of reducing the front yard setback in the low density zone. Currently, it's a 15-foot setback. All the other zones, the medium and high, it's 10 foot. So there's just a little more of it being set back, you know, and at the end of the day, like before HB 2001 came through, and you could look at our housing, you know, our low housing or excuse me, our low density zone is that like that American dream single family home type of zone, right? So houses are a little more set back on the property, but in the event someone wants to move it forward 5 feet, is that something that the board could consider? Keep in mind, this would not impact garage setbacks. We're not going to have those conversations. I don't support reducing garage setbacks. They're at 20 feet, and that's because most cars out there are just under 20 feet probably. If you have them go any further, you're going to be sticking out in the street or sticking into sidewalks. So those are heavily enforced, but just any thoughts on reducing, you know, the setbacks in the low density zone? Considering that middle housing is now going to be in the low density zone.
What are the side setbacks are 5 feet everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
I think, I mean, I'm fine with.
Speak into your mic, please.
I think I'm personally fine with the 10-foot setback. I don't think that we should be adjusting height restriction or the height limit though.
Okay.
I don't think, just because I don't think we're quite there yet, I don't think we need it. And just to kind of create a little bit of a balance between all the changes that we are making, no one wants to be living somewhere with a vacant lot or a tear down house next to them and have something go up that's 45 feet high or 40 feet or, you know, anything above 32 feet, which I think it's 32 feet, right?
32 in the low density, yeah. 35 in the high density, and in the high density and medium density, it actually goes up incrementally depending on how many units you have. So that would then, what's that, 45? Okay, so when it's a multifamily in those zones, it's 45. But that's a good thing to consider in the low density zone. To your point earlier, Commissioner Gosselin, that's, you know, we'll discuss potential notices or whatever of development. I think that's something that we need to kind of contemplate. Although no noticing to, you know, like no comment period. But if you keep it what it is and still allow those quadplexes, then you're still making those quadplexes kind of fit into the overall height of those zones. So, because that was actually a recommendation from the consultants, increasing the height. So I'm glad that you brought that up, and just staying to what it is. So you kind of have, it's a little bit lower of a building. We are talking only 3 feet though, but
Yeah, but yeah.
yep. Okay. Any other thoughts on these from commissioners?
No, I think keeping that height limit in place is good. I concur.
All right. Well, with that, we'll go on to the next. Parking is probably everybody's favorite topic whenever we talk about planning and land use. So I think I prepared a few slides for us to discuss. Something to look at here is just a breakdown of our current parking requirements. So if you're building a single family home, you're required to provide 2 spaces. If you build a duplex, you're required to provide 2 spaces, meaning 1 for each unit. And then middle housing, all of them that you can see in here, 1 for each unit. You get to the second ADU, the things with ADUs, how they work. You build an ADU on your property, 1 ADU doesn't require parking, but that second ADU does require parking. So some topics for consideration here. The 2 really are reducing the requirements for single family homes to just 1 parking space, and also evaluating whether ADUs, that second ADU, should be required to provide parking. Some other thoughts here that we'll get into. I have some other slides for it. Considering parking flexibility in the central business commercial zone, so our downtown zone, and supporting the housing and feasibility redevelopment opportunities through parking changes, parking exemptions, reductions, things of that nature. So the CBC, this parking example here, probably an incorrect title for you, but looking at the CBC zone, it consists of 3 sub-districts: CBC2, where parking is exempt; CBC1 and CBC3, we call those CBC3, we call it the fringe. It's the properties on the fringe of our CBC zone. I have a map that I'll show here in a second. And then CBC1 includes both of our historic districts. And one of the issues that comes up is that these older lots, the Dalles is very old. Many of the houses were built before the automobile. So there were many properties that were built, larger properties, a lot of square footage in some of our historic zones. They don't have parking. So if you have a single family home, you want to convert it. If you have a large 3,000 square foot old Victorian single family home, you want to turn it into a triplex, and you're in CBC1, you wouldn't be able to do it because you have to apply parking standards. So for everybody here, I just wanted to show, and hopefully this is easy to see here. The reason we have the hashed out there is because there is, how our CBC zone works is there's 2 zones laid on top of each other. It's kind of confusing, but basically what CBC1 is, that's the light blue, that's the CBC1. That is, to the left, you have Trevitz Addition. To the right, you have the Downtown Historic District. And then the central square is the CBC2. That is our commercial core. That is, everybody knows, that's like the center part of our downtown. It is possible for a property to be CBC1 and CBC2. A little confusing there. But then the outside is the CBC3. You're going to see, more businesses on the right-hand side to the east, and then to the southern side, you're going to see, there's definitely a collection of houses there on 4th Street, some older houses. So some redevelopment challenges. Brought up some of these, it's an example that we've been working through. A large multifamily development in portions of the CBC may qualify for parking exemptions. We saw that through the Basalt Commons project. They did provide parking on their property. They did not provide a one-to-one. It's 116 units, and I think they provided, 37 parking spaces, something like that. However, 2 blocks away in the CBC3, we're working with an individual who wanted to turn his small 1,000 square feet, maybe. He wanted to turn it into a duplex. We were going to require that he had 2 parking spaces. He could not provide it. Had some challenges with his development, ended up pulling back, wasn't able to move forward with his application. So just kind of looking at that difference between the two, you have a pretty small typical middle housing conversion compared to a multifamily development. And no shade thrown at either type of development by any means. This is just showing what we're working with. So the thought, so to touch on, the 2025 downtown parking study, did that study. It did show that there is adequate parking supply in our downtown area. So for those thoughts, I wanted to kind of plant the seed before we kind of talk about this. Should there be parking flexibility considered? What different housing types should have different parking requirements? Should parking standards vary by the zone? What types of projects should qualify for parking reductions? And then should the detached homes or the second ADUs have reduced parking requirements? I just want to open it up to the group here.
I'll throw some thoughts out there. I think if we are adding exemptions for our larger units, we should look at some exemptions in the CDC zones for our smaller units, like that duplex example. Um, you know, currently it's what is it? Currently it's essentially one parking spot per unit for duplexes. Uh, I don't know if we would want to, in those CDC zones, CDC3 in particular, allow people to have duplexes or those houses to do like a, what is it? Right now it's a 1-to-1, but maybe a 1-to-half, you know? So if you have a duplex, you only need one parking spot available. And that would be something that you could potentially scale, you know, as you go up if you have that simple change in requirement. I don't know if anyone else has any other thoughts on that.
You know, looking at the um, single family development, and having two, I think if you were able to reduce that to one, and then if you do have a second ADU, then that's when you would need to have come up with the two. I think that would be appropriate. Um, just
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I don't agree with is the Basalt Commons getting an exemption when they are, I mean, that's within a block of my business. And having 116 units and only being able to provide 37 spaces it's going to put a lot of pressure on the, not only just the main arteries downtown, but all of the side streets within several blocks of that location. It definitely is going to affect business. That will create a significant parking issue around my business for certain.
So I'm guessing you're saying no more leniency on CBC
Yeah.
parking exemptions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any consideration for like like a middle housing conversion in your eyes? That example like we used for that individual, because I think we do, there's not a huge housing supply in the CBC zone, right? I
Right.
mean, there's because it's mixed use, right? But there is, I think, that I was just thinking of that one example. This individual just wanted to add another 700 square foot unit in the basement and couldn't do it because there was this parking cap that he had to deal with. And I think he had the same thing, as he didn't want to. His concern was wanting to make sure he can provide it because of impacts that could come from other developments in the area, larger developments that aren't required as much. So just wanted to throw out that thought. If there's any thoughts on considerations for parking reductions or exemptions or tweaking the ratio within the CBC for middle housing specifically.
I mean, I think, you know, it'd be, in my mind, it would be acceptable, you know, if it's one or two, you know, and it's a old property and there's no way feasible to create a parking on that property. That's a little bit more acceptable for moving forward than, you know, something where we're looking at 70, you know, in a negative 70 on our parking. You know, just from the Basalt Commons, like that example, you know, we're looking at 37, we got 100. I mean, that's quite a bit of a gap. So I think if there's a certain gap, you know, for a building that just has already existed for X amount of time, I mean, I would be interested in having that conversation and a little bit more leniency on that. I think that part would be acceptable. But when it gets to being like 5 to 10, you know, that then we're talking about like, okay, that's putting stress on our parking situations and in the area.
Yeah, so maybe a thought could be considered if there's parking reduction specific to conversions. If you have a vacant
Yeah.
lot,
Yeah,
you can
right.
make parking work, right?
Yeah.
If you have a building that's taken up 80% of the land, 90% of the land, and they want to convert it, maybe there's an exception there. Is that maybe a thought?
Yeah.
That sounds fair. to
Two,
me.
4 units, because we can stay within this category of middle housing. You know, we're not
Mhm.
going to say that, you know, if you have a larger development and you want to convert a 5,000 square foot building, there isn't one downtown that would be converted into so many units, but not talking middle multifamily at all, but just maybe like a middle housing conversion, having some type of parking exemption.
I think that's fair.
That
Real quickie, should we take this time, this discussion, and these upcoming code changes to adjust the parking exemption in CBC one? Is this the time to do it?
CBC two.
Sorry.
So
Oh,
that
I
was
just-
actually approved by this board there was some gray area in our code that we cleaned up with the last code amendments that we did. The language used to say may be exempt. Now it says shall be exempt.
Yep.
If there's consideration for that, I would say we do it at another time. Probably not muddy the water with the middle housing, but some we can definitely look
Yeah,
into to
that's
see
fair.
if it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll definitely make a note.
Yeah.
Josh, do conversions also
I-
consider commercial properties downtown?
Yeah,
I'm thinking about like Last Stop, for instance,
yeah,
where that has potential on that second and third floor for development.
yeah. So that one is probably just that example specifically would be multifamily, and it's CBC two, so it already has an exemption. But let's say it's outside of that. Let's say it's in CBC three. Yeah, I guess somebody could potentially convert. Right now, the requirement in CBC two requires the ground floor to be commercial, but when you get into CBC one and CBC two, that requirement goes away if you're building multifamily. So someone could build a multifamily unit or convert an existing building to a multifamily unit and not be required to provide commercial on the bottom. So to your point, like I said, you could still limit the conversion to middle housing conversions.
Yeah.
That be
Fewer than 5 units. Mm-hmm.
and still get that parking waiver or exemption or
Yeah.
something. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
I had a thought. I've had my hand up for a while, but I don't know if anyone noticed.
Yeah, go ahead.
But on the talking about the CBC exemptions and talking about, the multifamily housing versus these bigger units, should we try to follow the rule of 5 that we talked about earlier? If there's 5 or more units, then you look at a different rules, but if it's less, like 4 essentially or less, then we could follow that like half rule on a reduction of parking requirements. That would kind of fix that duplex example all the way to a quadplex, as long as, you'd need 2 spaces for a quadplex versus 1 for a duplex, and then I guess that would fit into the triplex, two for a triplex, but that would ease up, I feel like, a little bit of those requirements on the CDC if that's not already exempted.
So I guess in that scenario, yeah, it's something we could consider. Would you be talking? Would that be new development or conversions?
I'm talking about conversions. Conversions. Well, I mean, you probably need to do new development just because the lots there aren't big enough, right?
Yeah, it would depend. Yeah. So if I'm maybe reading the room here, new developments would have some type of that half parking in half, but maybe middle housing conversions are exempt. Is that
That's how I feel.
I
maybe?
agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, any other questions anybody has?
Not on this one.
Okay. Well, thank you all for all the comments on this. It's really helping us, put this together, shape this thing. So code monitorization and design standards. Why are we revisiting our definitions again? It seems like every time we do a code update, we're always changing our definitions. We look at our definitions section. It's probably one of the most common sections that we look at. So the reason we're looking at it now, that the current terminology predates recent housing legislation. There's limited distinction between middle housing and multifamily. The Oregon Housing Needs Analysis and Model Code and recent Oregon codes utilize updated housing classifications. And the goal is to improve the clarity, consistency, and administration of housing regulations. And I think one of the biggest things here is that distinction between middle housing and multifamily that we've been talking about repeatedly tonight. So here's an infographic for you that really shows what our current code is and what we would be proposing. And so the current code, this is a list of the unit types that we have. ADU, cottage cluster, duplex, townhouse, multifamily, single detached, single attached, zero lot line. These are all currently in our code. A lot of those, some of them would stay the same with what we're proposing, which with the ONA model code, but it just clarifies a little bit. And it kind of that distinction that we've been talking about all night about 5 units plus, it's really going to start breaking that out. So it goes into your duplexes, which we have. It's actually specifically going to call out a triplex, a quadplex. And then townhouses are actually in the model code. Townhouses are listed as 2 units that are attached. Currently in the Dalles Municipal Code, it is a bit odd. We have single family attached zero lot line, which is 2 units that are attached to each other. It's basically a 2-unit townhouse, but it's not a townhouse by definition. A townhouse in our code is when you have 3 units or more. So to kind of clarify that a little bit, we just are going with we're proposing going with the townhouse definition in the model code because it just really it seems like it makes sense. I mean, I think obviously in the realtor world, I imagine you come across 2 houses that are butted up side by side and they're on different lots, and you're probably thinking that's a townhouse. Well, in the Dalles, it's actually a single family attached zero lot line, right? So it's just kind of this trying to get real with the times and the definitions. And the big distinction is that multifamily 5 units plus. So any thoughts on this?
I'm happy with the ONA model code.
Okay. So touching on some design standards, this is something that we won't go into all the detail on them, but we're trying to shift away a little bit from what we have with our design standards. Currently, we have menu-based standards. We have 10 standards listed in our code. The 10th standard is director approval. So if you can't, you come in for a single family home or a duplex, you have to meet 6 of the 10 listed standards. If you can only meet 5, the director can approve that 6th. And basically what the process is, very informal. Individuals submit some photos, what it's going to look like. And I'll tell you what, every single time I'm approving these standards. Another director may come and think that design doesn't fit. Well, that's a little too subjective in my opinion. It shouldn't be up to an individual to be really making a decision on, what one person might think is a good architectural feature compared to another individual. So these apply to detached homes and duplexes. What we're looking at is digging back into the ONA model code. They have additional standards that apply. One thing with our 6 out of 10, the 10 standards that we have, they are a bit older. They are for an older model type of house. Meeting those design standards for new modern houses, for instance, like a shed style roof, which is very common now with modern construction. That's not one of the standards that's called out. You know, there's these different things. There's window sills, for instance. There's gabled windows. There's certain things that are very specific, design standards that are very specific to an older style home and don't really meet these newer standards. So we would be looking into updating all of that, having a set of clear objective standards, and this would apply for all middle housing types. So and single family homes. So the thoughts here, questions here, should design standards be updated for middle housing and newer housing types? Work and residential standards be simplified? Should simpler standards apply across detached homes, middle housing? And should discretionary standards be replaced with more objective criteria? I think I kind of walked through some of these. I saw some head nods, but I was just wondering if there was any commissioner that's interested in digging further into our design standards or questions that you may have, or giving staff your blessing to move forward.
It all sounds good to me.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree. I agree mostly. I think that there should be like a few no-nos that are just like your house can't have this. For example, like you can't have a full like a run of 20 feet with no windows, or you have to have eaves to some degree. Like there should be some stuff that
Okay.
I think should be in there that just makes things look like a house as opposed to a shed or something.
Okay.
One thing to keep in mind if you're putting those sort of standards in place is a lot of not the townhouses, but if you have those packed in units, a lot of the times between the houses where you have like 10 feet between each other, they don't have any windows, or they have one window in the whole side of the house. So that might put some restrictions on those sort of developments.
Yeah, I know that people should be able to do what they want with their house and their property and all that other stuff, but and I know that even going there could, one restriction could turn into 10, could turn into 20 like pretty quickly. I don't know. I think there should be something. I'm just maybe not sure totally what it is.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe something vertical, like at least vertical or horizontal, like on one facing wall within that range. I'm just thinking make it a little bit more loose so that way they can put, a window, but that's kind of how those houses are designed, and that'll probably turn a lot of people away who have their, templates already to go with those one windows. So that would be my only comment on that sort of restriction.
So effectively, we still want to see some enforcement of design standards, but maybe be a little more flexible, or maybe have more options. So instead of choosing, maybe a thought is instead of choosing 6 out of 10, you're choosing 6 out of 20.
Sure.
Maybe something like that. So you're still making sure that the buildings being built in the Dalles still have a design, an aesthetic, but not necessarily shoehorning everybody into those that we currently have. Maybe a thought.
Yeah. Go
You're
ahead.
tiptoeing into some type of like a CCNR HOH type
HOA,
of thing,
yeah.
and then that's going to piss people off too, because like if you want to build something, you're building what you're building.
Yeah.
So I feel like you're kind of leaning more towards setting CCNRs
Yeah. And that's,
a neighborhood,
yeah. And that's what I'm trying not to do.
and that's kind of defeating the purpose of what's being proposed, I think.
I think, the design standards, I think maybe if you were to increase that list to 20 and still have people choose to meet 6 of those, think about the last 10 applications that you did and which ones you said are, okay, this is my director decision, and at like closed soffits, for instance, like, what you did for mine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and that's common. We're seeing more and more, and then they look clean. They're nice. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll take some, additional look, and I think there's additional options in this ONA model code, but just something for us to consider.
But I do agree with everyone. It shouldn't be like more CCNRs for telling people that it has to look a certain way. Obviously.
Yeah, 4-foot white picket fences. Correct. We won't do that.
Right.
So I just really wanted to go on this list. We've kind of touched on it a little bit. We won't get too far into it. I think this was more, and it's really the fifth part of your staff report. And I just wanted to kind of bring it up. That is something we'll continue to look into. However, there are two specific HPS actions that will really dig into this. We're housing and commercial areas and adaptive reuse and conversion. We talked about some adaptive reuse and conversion tonight, so that was helpful. But really looking at the adaptive reuse of existing buildings, this is going to be kind of diving into our non-conforming code section. We've had times where an individual reaches out and they have a non-conforming development. Dealing with non-conforming structures and non-conforming development can be kind of tricky. There's language in there talking about increasing there's this level threshold of increasing non-conformity. If you have an existing building that's built too close to the street, is it able to be converted into housing, or what's the steps for them to go through? So the goal with this is to kind of potentially look at those and loosen up the standards. I can think of one pretty neat house right by, or an old storefront over by the high school. You're going up to the high school. I think should be maybe on Court Street. You go up, it's on the eastern side. It butts right up to the street. There is no setback to it. Doesn't comply with any standards. It's non-conforming. But is that an opportunity for a residential unit? I mean, the building is there. What development standards do we really need to apply to a building that is already there if they're just converting it into a house, right? So that's what this idea stems from. NC overlay, as we touched on, I'll bring back some more information at a later date on those and what we're kind of looking at. And then the CBC housing flexibility, we talked about that, I think, with the parking. So just some questions here. We didn't really touch on this too much. So I have these slides up here. Are there anything, we have two realtors here. We have two individuals working downtown. Jared, apologies. I don't know where you work or your profession, but hey, you're involved in the group here anyways. Any thoughts that people may have on some of this adaptive reuse? You've probably seen these buildings. Like I said, the Dalles is old. The Dalles is old, and our code was adopted in 1998. A lot of stuff happened before 1998. There is a lot of non-conforming development. Any initial thoughts, barriers for adaptive reuse that maybe you've come across? Flexibility for these? Go from there.
I think flexibility is going to be, something that not only just the city of the Dalles, but overall throughout, because after we went through COVID, a lot of businesses went away from using offices, and a lot of people are working from home now. So those commercial spaces that have been used in the past, businesses don't really want to pay for all of those. So if we can utilize space and make it a little bit more flexible, but I think,
Are variances a thing that you are still seeing today?
At times.
I don't know if this would apply here. Like, for example, that building that you're talking about on Court Street that butts up to the street. Would it be a situation where in those certain instances, somebody could apply for variance and get some sort of leniency or exemption, but not necessarily change anything to where
Yeah.
do it?
Right off the top of my head, I think it's more that you would just follow through the process of the non-conforming section rather than the variance section. I'd have to take a closer look at it. Variances, yeah, we see them at times. I'm not the best salesman for variances. If you come into our office, variances are very difficult to meet, in my opinion. But the non-conforming code section, I think, touches on those types of things. Variances I see more applied to an individual wants to build a building up to the street, but there's a 10-foot setback. Or recently we had a variance for that subdivision block width, right? that was something that was, they had issues with the slope of the property type of thing. But we also have like mini variances, which are adjustments. So adjustments are more of a straightforward process. If I can talk to someone about a variance, I try to lean them towards that adjustment process. You can get a little more flexibility on certain standards, but hopefully that answers your question
A
somewhat.
little bit. So would that be an approach that maybe we could apply here for certain buildings that are non-conforming?
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, the variance route, or kind of using the mindset of a variance and just trying to clean up the non-conforming structure section might be something, you know. I don't
just thinking out
necessarily
loud.
if I would want to put people through the variance process. It's a tough one, you know. It's a really tough one. At the time since I've been with the city, we have not approved very many variances.
Jerry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with the other commissioner here on the NC and kind of opening things up a little bit. In particular, if you have grandfathered buildings where it's not new construction in particular, you know, and they do want to do, for example, that building, you know, specifically on grandfathered buildings, I think that that's really, we have some opening up for people to reutilize buildings for other purposes if it's needed for housing in particular. And I would say to put that towards housing in particular, not, you know, because we're talking about buildings where there used to be business fronts, now there's no more business front and it's just sitting there idle. And we want those used for housing. So maybe just shoehorn in grandfather to allow for these non-conformings to allow housing, but still go through obviously a review process. But that way, you know, you're using these buildings that weren't in use before, and it kind of, the idea is it fast tracks it, is my idea of what we're more or less trying to do. Open up more residents, make more building lots and units available. I feel like that kind of would go towards that. Any other thoughts on that, commissioners?
Real quick, what is the non-conforming procedure that you're talking about? Like when you get into the non-conforming section of the code,
Yeah.
what's that? What's in there? What's that mean?
The non-conforming, it just talks about standards that apply so to a non-conforming structure or use. So if something comes in front of us, individual wants to do this to their property, but it currently doesn't meet setbacks.
Huh, okay.
We just have to ensure that it doesn't increase the non-conformity of that use.
Okay,
you
got
know? If you have a if you have a 10-foot setback requirement, let's say, and the house is 8 feet, we're not gonna allow you to go to 7 feet, right?
it. Yeah.
You can stay at 8 feet, but then there's also some language in there about the different modifications that you make to it. If you make a modification, or if you change, if you take out that 8 foot, like say it's the front of the house, if you're making those changes, you're not given the right to like tear it out and then build it back to the 8 feet, right?
Right.
If you do any of that, you have to take it back. You have to meet those standards. So it's just, you know, overall, they can be, I think it's just worth revisiting that section of the code just to make it a little easier, the language to be easier, but there's not necessarily like a non-conforming application or something.
Okay.
It's just, when you're doing any kind of remodel or redevelopment of non-conforming building, just requires a little more on everybody's end to kind of figure out what exactly is happening.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think like taking that building on Court Street, for example, if someone wanted to convert that into housing, I think it should go back through just a standard building permit process. I think for houses that are that old, and we may need to like, I don't even know if putting a year on it, I think it should probably go through a structural engineer process. Like, is this thing even safe to be in? Can you start making these changes? And then it goes through the regular building permit process of updated electrical, updated plumbing, updated mechanical, all that stuff. Otherwise, we're just allowing retrofitting of older
Yeah.
houses that are ultimately just going to be unsafe.
Yeah, and that structural engineering would definitely be triggered by building codes. Yeah. Depending on what depending on what it's going to be, there's also, as you probably all know, there's a lot of difference between residential and commercial building code too. And what's the threshold, so, but yeah, all good suggestions. So with that, we got a lot of feedback here. Thank you all for your comments on this. We're going to take this back, kind of start looking at the code a little bit further. I think we've checked off some of the big questions that we had, and the guidance to move these things forward. I think if there's any that are either, in a gray area, or we don't feel that they're going to make it into this package, maybe it's a conversation for another day, or we bring these back forward. Staff will definitely take a look before we bring something in front of you. Typically how we've done this, we have a discussion and then we bring the code amendments to you. I'm pretty confident we could bring some code amendments in front of you just from this conversation that we had, but we'll go back to see. I don't want to bring any surprises in front of the commission when we're actually reviewing the code amendments themselves. However, as we know the process with code amendments, if we bring something in front of you, you can always strike a certain standard that night, and it can be an amended code amendment that you adopt some evening. So we'll just take a closer look to make sure that you're not presented with any surprises that wasn't included in this presentation or in the staff report when we bring those back forward. But the goal is, like I said, we'd like to see some adoption of this middle housing, get it moving forward this summer. With that, I'm happy to answer any other questions, but I think there's been a lot already.
Yeah. This summer, we be looking to get these to city council.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's the goal. Yeah, I mean, at this point, we've said August to bring this back in front of the planning commission. I just want to make sure that, after we go through all of this, like I said, you guys won't be surprised if we make any tweaks here and there, whatever the case is. There's probably some aspects of it that may just occur, like maybe we're talking the adaptive reuse, or those potentially could be packaged up in future HPS actions.
ready to move on to the next step? Next stop. Okay. Next stop. Going back to the legislative public hearing. Okay. Zoning ordinance amendment 112-26, City of the Dalles. Adoption of. I'm just going to get into the script. Now is the time specified for the commission to conduct a legislative public hearing to consider the following matter. Consideration of zoning ordinance amendment application number 112-26, City of the Dalles, and adoption of resolution number PC 633-26, recommending city council approval of amendments to Title 10 of the Dalles Municipal Code, clarifying and conforming quasi-judicial land use procedures to the city council's previously adopted hearings officer review process, and making associated technical amendments. This hearing requires the commission to consider explanation of the relevant criteria, standards, policies, and laws, a statement of basic facts relied upon in rendering the recommendation, and the evidence in the record. The criteria on which the commission will base its consideration of this matter are found in the city's comprehensive plan, the Dalles Municipal Code Title 10, applicable state laws and administrative rules, and the staff report. Anyone who wishes to testify must be recognized by me before testifying. When I recognize you, please proceed to the microphone or unmute if participating by Zoom, and state your name and mailing address for the record. The hearing is also required to be recorded. Generally, the public hearing procedure will go as follows. Prior to the public hearing, we will begin with the staff report and any questions the commission may have for the staff. Next, I will ask for testimony from anyone who wishes to offer relevant testimony or ask relevant questions to this matter, limited to no more than 3 minutes per testifier. After a public testimony, staff will have an opportunity to respond. When this process has been concluded, I will close public testimony and the commission will deliberate towards a recommendation. To expedite the hearing, commissioners may ask questions of persons as they testify, and I may exclude or limit cumulative, repetitious, or immaterial testimony consistent with the Planning Commission bylaws. During the hearing, some important standards apply. First, if you testify, please address your testimony to the applicable criteria or other criteria which the person believes applies to the recommendation from the comprehensive plan or the Dalles Municipal Code Title 10. Second, failure to raise an issue with enough detail to allow the commissioners, staff, or other participants an opportunity to respond to that issue prohibits an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. Third, failure to participate in this public hearing, either orally or in writing, precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals. These are the rules. Are there any questions?
No.
Do any of the members of the commission wish to make any actual or potential conflict of interest disclosure or abstain from participating or voting on this matter because of the possible financial benefit or detriment resulting from the legislative action?
No.
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 No for me as well. Okay, we're opening the public hearing and staff report.
Great, thank you. As mentioned, touched on this a little bit. This is ultimately a cleanup from a little bit of house cleaning. What was adopted general ordinance number 26, 1424 in January. That's when we implemented the hearings officer. We also changed the frequency of planning commission meetings. Planning commission is going to be focused more on these discussions like we just had and these legislative actions. Ultimately, what happened after we adopted, we started meeting with some potential hearings officers, and we noticed those that are already in the business, they noticed there was just some items that we needed to clean up. Really, basically the final actions, ultimately, like clarifying the hearings officer decision to notice procedures. Certain things went into it. Some of the language, specifically there's a resolution that the planning commission signs. A hearings officer does not sign a resolution. So these types of changes, ultimately, nothing's changing other than the procedure to ensure that this hearings officer process is implemented smoothly. So in addition to that, revising quasi-judicial hearing procedures to distinguish between a hearings officer and a multi-member hearings body, clarifying the appeal procedures, and identification of the city's final local decision, aligning quasi-judicial zone changes procedures with the adopted review process, replacing, some cleanup. There was some language in there that basically says, we have our permitted use tables that say all the different uses that are allowed. At the very bottom, there's always uses as determined by the director, uses as determined by the planning commission. Those have been kind of tweaked and changed to make sure that it aligns with this. Aside from that, this followed, typical notification process. We notified the Department of Land Conservation and Development April 28th of this change, as we were required to do with any change of our code. This was 35 days before this meeting, where this was published in the paper. It was also up on the city's website. And no comments were received to this to date. We always have a commenter from the Fair Housing Council of Oregon reach out anytime we have a code amendment, responded back to them, showed us what we were doing, showed them what we were doing, no comments back. So that was actually the only inquiry on this change here. And as you can see, if you look through those red lines, which are included on as Exhibit C, you'll see they're really just cleanups to our procedure process. Aside from that, we've provided a set of findings, which, are based on the comprehensive plan, statewide planning goals. Those are provided here. I honestly won't go through and bore you with all of them, but it's basically a process that we go through to ensure. With this being a cleanup, I didn't really get too far into the weeds on it. And staff's recommendation, move to recommend to City Council the approval of zoning ordinance amendment 112-26, adopting the amendments and findings attached herein. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does the commission have any questions for staff at this time?
No questions here.
No.
No questions.
Does anyone, nor do I, does anyone from the public wish to offer relevant testimony or ask relevant questions on this matter for up to 3 minutes? If so, please state your name and address for the record. And we have no one from the public in the audience or the Zoom audience. Do the commissioners feel they have enough information to make a recommendation?
Yes.
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 We're ready for deliberations? Okay, moving on. I am closing the public testimony portion of the hearing. And we're on to commissioner deliberations. If we need to talk about anything, I've read this and I have no comment.
Yeah.
In that case, I will entertain a motion to adopt resolution. And that motion language is found on page 34 of the packet.
I move to recommend to the City Council the approval of zoning ordinance amendment 112-26, adopting amendments and findings attached herein.
I
Second.
second.
Okay, the motion was
second.
made and seconded by 3 people. That's good. In that case, we shall vote. All in favor of making the recommendation as stated in the motion, raise your right hand and say aye.
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 Aye. That is unanimous. Thank you. And then do we need to also make a motion to vote the resolution, or is that all within it? Okay. Okay, then that's that. Moving on to the next, any staff comments or updates?
Yeah, I talked a lot, so I'll keep it quick. We are in the process of finalizing a contract for a new hearings officer. We have not. I know the goal was to roll out in April. On our end, there's been a little bit of slow movement on it, but there's also has not been any quasi judicial applications to bring forward to a hearings officer. The city is currently working on a. You may have heard the city's partnered with University of Oregon for the next 2 years for a Sustainable Cities Year program. So this is actually some pretty exciting work where we're going to touch on multiple different things from economic development to housing, historic preservation, transportation. Effectively what it is every term we're going to be working with various different classes. Basically courses are going to be designed around community engagement projects. And those projects are going to be, we'll have basically work from, hours of student time that is going to be contributing to different projects that we've outlined in a work plan. Our work plan is currently about 13 different actions or projects we want to work on. And this all stemmed from another housing production strategy initiative to discuss pre-approved plans. And now this is something we've talked about before. It's kind of been thrown around the state for a while. The state is intending on having a pre-approved plan program. Don't hold your breath. It's going to be a while. So we're moving forward with that. And it's really actually kind of exciting. We're looking at potentially a fall term of starting with University of Oregon's architecture program out of their Portland wing. And still ironing that out, but there could be a potential for, maybe some partnerships with some local architects, as well as potentially looking at a partnership with the city of Hood River to really come up with kind of like a, trying to spread our resources as much as we can. The idea when it's all said and done my vision for this is you go to the city's website, you're going to go to a page, and you're going to download a set of plans. Those plans have already been seen by building codes. Keep in mind, you still have to figure out your site plan, still have to figure out different foundations. We're figuring out all those details, but the plan behind it is that there'll be readily available plans for individuals to come through. There's ADUs already out there. There's some single family homes, but our housing production strategy team really wanted to focus on plexes. So I think it's a challenge. It's an exciting challenge, but I think it parallels really well with what we discussed this evening on the middle housing work. If we can have a fourplex, a quadplex that's readily available to download online, that's just going to continue to hopefully increase development. So exciting, more to come on it. I'll report it back when we get further into that process. In addition to that, we have our community development analyst, Ann Moorhead. She is actually our former RARE. So she was our RARE a couple years ago. She came back and she's doing some work with the city while she completes her Master Urban Planning at Portland State University. She's 1 year in, but she's been working with us this school year. She'll be working with us next school year. Ann's kind of been working behind the scenes on a lot of coordinating the SCYP as well as some other housing production strategy work that she's just really kind of moving along on that. Upcoming meetings for the commission, it's looking like potentially August. August is what I want to target for another meeting. Not only have this conversation, but also we'll be making some amendments to the comprehensive plan, the city recently adopted water conservation plan, and as required with state law requires that we adopt a water conservation plan into our comprehensive plan. So that's also going to be kind of one of these pretty simple, streamlined, what I think, comprehensive plan amendment. I won't bore you too much with the staff report on that one. It's going to be quick and easy, I hope. And then just an update on some developments recently. There's a subdivision that recently just finished up and they just started building over on Veterans Way. Pretty amazing views. Go out of town toward the Veterans on your way out of town, and you're going to see to the left-hand side to the riverside. I think 4W Development. They build some really nice houses in the area. They are a local development team. So they're building kind of on the top shelf. There's about 10 units, and then the second phase is going to be dropping down, and you're going to have some other units on the bottom side. But they are already, first building permit's been approved, second is on its way approved. So there's two. And that subdivision was probably, the plat was only signed probably maybe the beginning of the year, and they got right to work. So it's nice to see that. We also have another subdivision being built. They're in construction over on the west side on Kingsley, like 16th and Kingsley, effectively. So there's a new 25 unit subdivision going on over there. This is spearheaded by Columbia Gorge Affordable Homes. So I think it is going to be like a manufactured home development, a little private road development out there. Nice designs. They're moving forward on that one. So aside from that, I am happy to answer any questions.
Just going back to when you said about the plans for like the ADUs, you said is that something that was just statewide, or is that something on the city's website for people to actually download those plans?
Yeah, so when we have it set up, we will create a page that is going to, a great thing about government is we can kind of steal things from each other. So if one government agency created it, we've already talked to the city of Eugene. They already have a page that they created. They went through a process. They created something. The city created one that they let you download for free, but then they have other options available that you have to connect with a designer, but they got as low as $500, then you can download the set of plans. But to your point, yeah, we will have a web page that's going to have maybe some ADUs readily available. We're looking into some initial conversations with the city of Boise. City of Boise has a really nice one that I just came across the other day. I think they were working with one designer there. But yeah, when it's all said and done, it would be just on the city's website, and it would be full construction plans. Still trying to figure out the details, because when you're working with architecture students, they can take it so far, but to take it the rest of the way, you have to have a licensed architect, potentially an engineer. So we're looking at how to structure the program. It might be a two course seminar type of thing. The initial is like working on that concept design, getting the drawings done. And the second half of the seminar is going to be really getting into the weeds and the mechanics of it and all of that. So yeah.
Anything else, guys? All good? All right. Then let's adjourn. Thanks, everyone. That was awesome. I'm glad everyone came. And
Thank you.
Yeah, that was awesome. Good stuff. Meeting adjourned. 7:18.
Thanks,
Very
Josh.
good. Super stoked for you on the riverfront
Yeah.
space.
Yeah,
Are you gonna do
me
food
too.
there?
Yeah,
Obviously you have
we
to.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we're gonna do the full bar.